Hi, my name is Cameron Miller, and this is Trinity Place in Geneva, New York. And this is a reflection on the readings for Lent 1, first Sunday of Lent. Welcome. I'm going to ask each of us to do something that we do not like, which is to touch our fear. To touch our fear. Now remember, a lion knows as much fear as a Thompson's gazelle. It's just that the gazelle wears its fear much more visibly. But lion and gazelle own fear, both own fear, even if in different ways and about different things, and they both carry that fear wherever they go. So do we. So if you're wondering why I'm talking about fear today, it's because Jesus in the wilderness is all about fear. So to help us touch our fear, I'm going to engage in a little simulation. Now, this here is my favorite backpack. I actually have a bunch of them at this point, but this is my favorite one. I bought it when I was traveling alone for the first time to El Salvador. Before this, I had gone to El Salvador many times, but always with others, large groups of others. And the backpack that I took with me on this particular trip when I was traveling alone suddenly and literally fell apart in the Atlanta airport. It just kind of disintegrated. So I bought this one. I was traveling with my fears that day. I don't love flying to begin with, and not only because of my tall length in those little seats. I just don't like flying. And my Spanish was better at that point, but it was none too good. And I was not being met at the airport by anyone, and the airport is about an hour from the capital city of San Salvador, where I was going. And so I felt apprehensive about finding my way for the first time by myself where I was going. So all of which is to say, this backpack has had some fear in it. And I'm going to pass it around here on Sunday and invite people to deposit one or more of their fears inside, right in there. Now, nobody will know which fear you put into the backpack, and because this is an exercise in imagination, nobody else knows how big your fear is. It's just a game of pretend. and you don't even have to play. And I mean, if you're too scared to play, if it feels too scary to play, then it's already worked, and you can just pass the backpack on. So just to be clear, this is a game of pretend in which you are asked to name a fear that you carry. To name it to yourself silently. It's not a sharing exercise. This pretend, and then you're going to pretend that you're putting that fear either into my backpack right here, or into some box or bowl or can you have nearby there at home. If you don't want to play, that's fine. Just pass it on to the next person if there's more than one of you there. When the last fear has been deposited in this backpack here on Sunday, I'll zip it up and I'll put it where our prayers will soon be, which is here on the altar. We use these prayer stones in Lent to rub our prayers in and then to bring them up at a particular point in the liturgy and place them on the altar. Now, let's begin by taking a very brief moment in quiet to call up a fear or two, to touch it. Thank you. now, here comes the backpack, or whatever it is you have there at home to place your fears in. The title of this sermon is Wilderness is Where We Go to Find Freedom from Our Fear. Wilderness is where we go to find freedom from our fear. Now, I know that might seem like an oxymoron, but the wilderness is where we will discover freedom from fear. Yeah. But please, don't hear more than I'm promising at the same time. It's not that we will no longer be afraid, but that we may find the freedom that comes from living in spite of our fear, living fully in spite of our fear. The fears don't go away. There's only one way that I know of that we discover that kind of freedom, and I'll share it with you in a minute. But let's leave fear hanging there for a minute and allow me to talk a little bit about this Jesus story. The story of Jesus in the wilderness was told in order to make Jesus look and sound like Moses. Moses leads the escaped slaves in the wilderness for 40 years. And Jesus is in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. Moses spends 40 days and 40 nights on the mountain with God, during which time he neither eats nor drinks anything. Jesus, in his wilderness, does not eat or drink either. Moses, when the people he is leading rebel and question God, reminds them that they do not live by bread alone. Jesus, in his story, reminds his nemesis that we do not live by bread alone. Moses lectures the escaped slaves as they prepare to enter the promised land, not to forget who brought them to their liberation, and so warns them to worship God and God alone. Jesus, when offered great power and authority, reminds his nemesis of the same thing. Worship the Lord your God and serve only God. Finally, Moses cautions his people not to test God, but to remember that their identity and their meaning derives from how they live their lives. Jesus recalls the same thing when he is challenged to test God's real-world, real-time power. So you see, this wilderness story is told the way it is told because the author's belief that Jesus is the new Moses. Now, most Christians hear that story without any context, and so they think it's about Jesus versus the devil, like some Marvel comic movie. To tell people that Jesus did all the same stuff that Moses did is to say that Jesus is a great, great prophet in the mold of the greatest prophet, Moses. So as Christians, we need to understand that Jesus did not come out of nowhere or sprout from nothing. Jesus is Jesus because Moses was Moses, and they are both peas in the same pod. Now, back to the wilderness. Wilderness is the place of freedom. Wilderness is the place of freedom, and wilderness is any time and any place that we discover freedom from our fears. This first category of fear in the Jesus in the wilderness story is the dread of hunger. Jesus' first temptation has to do with hunger. Now, we can see hunger in this story as having to do with an empty stomach, and bread as having to do with satiating that hunger, or we can understand it as metaphoric, as in, we have hunger. We have hungers. We are hungry for love. We're hungry for acceptance. We're hungry for approval. We're hungry for success, for companionship, for security, for beauty, for youth, for health, for whatever it is we have and are afraid of losing, or whatever it is we had and already lost. We don't need a devil in our world to create the situation that Luke has described We have marketing and advertising and consumerism and literally millions of people hawking wares that claim to satiate our hungers and put away our fears. With convenience stores and Snicker bars and Gatorade, we need never be hungry or thirsty ever again. And should we feel hungry or afraid or disappointed about anything, there's an app for that. There's a pill for that. There's a surgery for that. Here's the thing I want you to hear. Jesus tells us, be hungry. Be hungry. Hunger. Feel the want. Feel the fear. Feel the want that might never be met. In touching it, in feeling it, we will find freedom from it. Does not mean we have to stay hungry or that we can't feed our need, but until we feel the want and touch the fear, it will own us. Did you get that? It will own us. The second category of fear in this Jesus story, to go right along with fear owning us, because we don't want to feel it, and so we stuff it and deny it. The second category of fear in this Jesus story is powerlessness. We hate it. It drives us crazy. What is the proverbial need for control, if not the fear of powerlessness? Now, some of us are better at tolerating powerlessness than others, but nobody likes to smack up against their limitations. A limitation is what we hit when we cannot do something or do something as well as we would like to do it. A limitation is when we want the world or our life or our relationships or another person to do and be what we want them to do or be. A limitation is like a slap in the face. And when we encounter such limitations in public in some kind of way, it evokes a very special kind of humiliation. So, as you might have guessed, Jesus says, be powerless. Be powerless. Know your limitation. In fact, let your limitation bark in your face and be fully immersed in the hot, dark mud of it. Then, when we are confronted with the limitation, we will be able to surrender to a power greater than ourselves. And until we can do that, we will be owned by our fear. Our fear will own us. Powerlessness is a base human fear for everybody. And yet, if we do not touch it, we will never learn the base human experience of faith, which is surrender. Yeah, faith is trust that allows us to surrender to powerlessness. Yeah, I know. The third category of fear in this classic Jesus story is the fear of death. But this is truly the trickiest of the three fears. The fear is not about death per se, not as in a mortal ending. The fear is about meaning or the loss of it. Most of us, if we had a rock-bottom confidence in the meaning and the purpose of our lives, could let our lives go quietly when called upon to do so. The fear is that our life does not have meaning, or that the meaning will not be known by anyone else. The fear is that we will go silently into the night and nobody will notice. The fear is that we will live for the wrong things, or that we lived wrongly for the right things, or that we did not achieve enough, or we're not good enough, or that we will not be loved enough, especially by the one whose love matters most when we die. We fear death when we do not trust in the value of the meaning we have chosen to spend our lives on. Is that backpack full yet? So the wilderness is any place or any time that we allow ourselves to touch our fears and to feel them, to get right in the face of them and say, yeah, I know you. We don't do it very often because somehow we imagine if we chase the fears away, we won't feel the fear anymore. But we always have the fear, whether we're a lion or a gazelle. There's always stuff to be afraid of, and sometimes for good reason. But our fears need not own us. And as long as we keep them at arm's length, and as long as we try to numb ourselves from feeling them, and as long as we engage in intricate dances to avoid acknowledging them, they will own us. Our fears, they will own us. When we do not see our fears, and when we do not feel our fears, and we do not know our fears and know where they are, we can be certain that they are moving about in the shadows and that we are acting and reacting to their presence, and nothing good comes of that. That's also when our fear is the most powerful and dangerous, when we don't know it's there because we've hidden it. That's why, as Jesus did, we enter the wilderness and we touch our fears from time to time. If need be, we can ask God to hold our hand in the process, or somebody else. So that is really what the season of Lent is all about. Whatever ritual we practice or engage in, like giving something up or doing something that we don't normally do, it ought to help us in some way be in the presence of our fear so that we might discover freedom in the midst of it. Now, if you thought I was collecting these fears to get rid of them or to somehow magically make them disappear, you were wrong. I collected them to place here in our midst. I did that on Sunday, and I hope we're doing that together here now. I'll place them on the altar where we will be invited to place our prayer via these stones. They are our fears, and they are legion, and they are here with us. So we need to know them. We need to feel them, check in with them now and again. Allow ourselves to feel them and to hear them. Gracious God, please hold our hands as we walk out into the wilderness and touch our fears. Thanks for being here. May you know peace this week. May it hold you, and may you share it.